What's up YouTube, TCG Radish here, back with another Mystic Stadium deck profile. And today we've got the new deck, the High Tide Counter deck, and it's largely made of new cards from the Legions of the Deep Sea expansion set. And I've been experimenting with a few brews of this deck, and I've been trying an arena-based one with a lot of moons and Tropical Dreambird and Arena Nexus. And that's in a more defensive build, but I don't have all of the cards for that one yet. So this is more of just a standard brew and just an example of what a High Tide deck could look like. So yeah, without further ado, let's get right into it. First off, I run 3 Fishman Legionnaire, a pretty nice, basic, aggressive High Tide card. It increases the tide counter by 2 when you play it, and as long as the tide counter is 5 or greater, it's a 6/6, which is the standard stat line of Lumberjack. So it's basically Lumberjack for cost 1, which is pretty good. Next up, 2 Coral Turtles, 1 Power 7 Shield, and it has Flash Shield, and when it's destroyed, it increases the tide counter by 3. So a pretty basic defensive tide card. Next up, I got 2 Tidal Cavalry. It's a card that's pretty much only good when the tide counter is kind of high, but it can be pretty great to finish off games because it can attack 3 times as long as the tide counter is 8 or greater, and it also allows you to stun monsters at the start of your turn if the tide counter is 5 or greater. And a lot of the cards in this deck are designed to raise the tide counter, so yeah. 2 Golden Arm Siren next, and this is a card that is basically just removal as long as the tide counter is 5 or greater. Again, the stats aren't bad either. And then for the big baddie, we've got cost 5 Trident Lord Dragons, which are cost 5, 11 power 15 shield monsters with spell shield 2, which balance all of your opponent's stuff to their hand at the end of the turn, and it can attack unless the tide counter is 10 or greater, but when its attack hits, then your opponent breaks an additional soul. And this monster is still valuable even if you are not attacking with it, because it's able to get that bounce. It's got a lot of shield, so for 5 cost, you are getting a relatively solid monster. Monsters that generally start in the soul zone would be 2 of Hacker Rabbit to disrupt your opponent's plays, and a 1 of Locksmith Fairy to disrupt really draw-heavy, aggressive decks. For spells, we've got 3 Quick Energy, of course, as well as 2 Tide Token, which allows us to increase the tide counter by 3 or draw a card if the tide counter is 5 or greater. And we've also got 2 copies of Arcane Arrows for board wipes on smaller monsters. As for the flash cards, we've got 3 Crashing Wave, which acts as a strictly better Fan of Jadewind as long as the tide counter is high enough. I generally start with 1 in the soul, but having the ability to run 3 is important for some more aggressive matchups or when you just really need to get monsters out of the way. I also run 2 Cyclone Spike for energy disruption and 1 Spell Shatter to stop quick energy. The last card in this deck is a 3 of Ocean Moon, which is the simple arena card which increases the tide counter by 1 every turn, including if it's your opponent's turn. This deck doesn't run Nexus, so you can't have more than 1 in the stadium at a time, but it's important to be able to find this card since it is the main way that we will increase the tide counter. So there you have it. That's an example deck list for a High Tide deck for the LDS main format of Mystic Stadium. Is this the most optimized deck ever? Probably not. But I have been playing more with the Shadow Core deck recently, so I will definitely experiment with this one a little more in the future. The main question I have now is which is better, the aggressive tide counter decks or the more slow roll ones where you try to set up a lot of Coral Turtles and defend and use Ocean Moons to just build the tide counter up really large to a point where you have more of an advantage. And that's probably matchup dependent, but we will see for the future. So thanks as always for watching. Huge thanks if you're subscribed to the channel, and I'll see you next time.